So we're going to talk about that. We need to find out what the CDC actually really says about vaccines. And what they say is that vaccines are among the nation's most important public health tools. They save lives and money, protect people, and particularly infants and young children, from unnecessary suffering caused by vaccine-preventable diseases, and improve the quality of life for infants, children, adolescents, and adults. Since the introduction of safe and effective vaccines, the United States and most developed countries have experienced at least a 97% reduction in the number of cases of vaccine-preventable diseases of childhood compared to pre-vaccination era. Reported cases of vaccine-preventable diseases in children are at currently record low levels. However, these diseases can readily return if immunization levels decline as a result of complacency or other factors. And I always like to say the other factors are informed people. They're informed people who decide that maybe that really isn't the complete truth. And this whole area here, where we talk about each one of these individual things, I do a 2-day, 14-hour seminar that is a background information on each of the individual vaccines. And when we do, so we spend 14 hours doing this topic, we take each one of these things apart line item and show that there's another side of the story than what you're being told by conventional doctors. Which brings about another point, is when people come up to me and say, "Hey, Sherry, what can you tell me about vaccines?" I kind of chuckle and say, we better narrow that down a little bit or we're going to be here a really long time. The other thing that they say about vaccine people who decide they want to get informed is that they're an anti-something. They're an anti-vaccine consumer. And they tend to be those with a child who had a bad reaction, which of course could have been a coincidence. And those who believe that the government should not tell them what to do. And those who are increasingly focused on the perceived benefits of alternative medicine. Well, since I've been doing alternative medicine in my practice for 7 years, I know that there's more than just perceived benefits, and I know that some of you here can feel the same way. And this person here, this Dr. Bruce Gellin, is the head of the Vaccine Initiative Pediatric Infectious Disease Society, and this came out in 1999. And I want to tell you that that's pretty much the thinking of the way conventional doctors think about people. It's not that you are a pro-choice consumer. It's not that you want to be informed. It's that you're an anti-something. So I think one of the things that's really important, and I think it's really important to understand early on, is the difference of in a definition. The definition difference between vaccination and immunization, because they're not the same thing. So when you hear people saying that they're going to take their kids to the doctor to get their immunizations, they're really not. What they're really doing is they're taking them to get vaccinated, because what vaccination means, it's a physical act of administering a vaccine. It means going to get a shot. Immunization, on the other hand, means the process of trying to induce artificial immunity. So they're really different. And not only are they different conceptually, even the CDC says that although persons often use vaccination and immunization interchangeably, the terms are not synonymous. The administration of a vaccine, which is what they call an immunobiologic, cannot be automatically equated with the development of immunity. So just because you get a shot doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be immune. Just because you get a shot doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have an antibody, and just because you have an antibody doesn't mean it's going to protect you from disease. And we're going to talk about that a lot more in depth as time goes on. Now, one thing I just want to point out here is you'll see as we go through these slides, you'll see these citations down here at the bottom that start with MMWR. That stands for Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. Those are CDC documents that come out every week that talk about various types of disease processes and infectious processes. So every time you see MMWR in any of these slides, you know that that comes directly from a government document. So we've got a really big public health policy here. We've got laws in every state. Now we've got this national umbrella called the Homeland Security Bill that we can ratchet up vaccination, mandatory vaccination to a federal level. We have to have some reason to do this. We have to have some policies behind this. Well, the first one is that vaccines are safe. And it doesn't matter what you read in the public press, if you're reading in the New York Times, if you're reading in some medical journal, that's almost one of the first things that you hear, is the vaccines are safe, and right behind that, that vaccines are effective and the effects are long-lasting. Vaccine benefits include the decline of infectious diseases, and that vaccines are the only way to prevent epidemics of those dangerous diseases like mumps and chickenpox. Okay, so these are like the public health policy. This is the cornerstone upon which we have formulated our entire public health policy. So we're going to go through today and look at each one of these things and show you that there's another side to this that you may not know. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about today is the design of a safety study. because a safety study is the cornerstone upon which everybody says that vaccines are safe. So what is a safety study? Well, it's really not what you think. Because in the design of a safety study, the way it should be designed is a true safety study. You should take a new vaccine and compare it to an inert substance, something like saline or sterile water. But what happens instead is that you get a new vaccine and you compare it to a second vaccine of a known safety profile. Now, when you talk to your family practice doctor, you talk to your pediatrician about that, I can guarantee you he doesn't know that, or she doesn't know that. And I've had several meetings recently with doctors, and I've said that to them. I said, you know, when they bring a new drug to market, like a new anti-inflammatory, a new antidepressant, they take that drug, and they really, truly compare it to a sugar pill, to a placebo, and see what happens. When they do a new vaccine, they compare a new vaccine to an old vaccine with an existing profile, and they are really pretty shocked by that. This all started way back when the Institute of Medicine approved the use of looking at a pertussis vaccine versus a rubella vaccine to see if the side effect profiles were the same. So this started back in the early 1990s, and it actually started way back even during the polio trials, but we won't get into that today. The other thing that happens is that safety studies only include healthy children, and that even though after the safety study is completed, the vaccine will be approved to use in all children. And this is an example that came from the Pediatric Infectious Disease Journal that said when they were designing this study that the potential subjects that were excluded had neurological disease, seizures, autoimmune functions such as HIV. But once this vaccine has been approved and has been put into the pediatric schedule, any child will be able to get it and will most likely be recommended to get it because they would say that the risk of getting the infection in immunocompromised children is worse than the possibility of getting the disease, or than getting the infection. So what ends up happening with that is that on the very large scale, when they do studies, they do somewhere between 800 or 2,000 or even 20,000 kids. But when they start vaccinating on a mass vaccination scale, those children become the test subjects. Because what they actually say in the CDC documents is that the test studies and the trials aren't large enough to be able to define all the possible side effects. The other thing that happens is that serious side effects can be negated simply with the stroke of a pen. And here's two examples that I'm going to read to you a little bit out of a study because I think that this makes a very big, important point. Is that when safety studies are designed, if the conclusions are not in line with if there's any data that's not in line with the conclusions, then what ends up happening is that it's just negated. So here's a study that they used 882 healthy infants, there's that healthy infant part again, to compare Comvax, a new vaccine that had the Hib and the hepatitis B in it. They gave them to one, and then the other ones they gave the Hib and the hepatitis B in 2 separate shots. So they're comparing a new combination vaccine in 1 vial compared to 2 separate shots. That's what's considered the design of the safety study. As they go through this, that there were, during the study, there were 17 children, or nearly 2%, that had events within 14 days of vaccination that met the defining criteria of a serious adverse experience. These included seizure, diarrhea, vomiting, dehydration, bronchiolitis, tachypnea, which is really rapid breathing, pneumonia, reflux esophagitis, and vitreous hemorrhage, which is bleeding in the back of the eye. Virtually all of these experiences were classified as serious because they involved hospitalization. None was judged by the study investigators to be caused by the vaccine. So at the end of the study, up here at the beginning, where it says is the results, there were no serious adverse experiences attributed to the vaccine people in the study, and none were attributed to the vaccine. So just by the stroke of a pen, they can decide that all of those side effects that happened had nothing to do with the vaccine. There's another study just to show you that this happens repeatedly, and all of the studies are like this. Here's another one that they compared 2 different hepatitis B vaccines. And they did it on healthy infants. And during phases of the study, people were excluded that had seizure disorders. And during the course of the study, that several children had SIDS, and several people were found to have seizure disorders. However, none were found by the study investigators to have anything to do with the vaccine. So the conclusion of the study is that both vaccines were safe and effective and they induced antibodies. So just by the stroke of a pen, they can knock out whatever they don't want to apply. So this is a summary of what I just said, because that was kind of complicated, so I want you to get what I'm really trying to tell you here. Is that the new vaccine was compared to the other vaccine, and that was considered the placebo. One of the cornerstones of medicine is double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. That's the science upon which our entire industry builds its consensus. Well, the placebo here is another vaccine. Only healthy infants are enrolled. So after the vaccine is approved, it's given to all of them. And that serious events were negated by the stroke of a pen. And what was actually said in both of those studies is that none was judged by the investigators to be related to vaccination, which always brings up a really important question. Why is it whenever there's a side effect or a complication, it's never the fault of the vaccine? The conclusion? Well, the vaccine is safe and effective. And I can tell you that most people, most doctors, when they read these studies, they don't read the whole study. They don't have time to read the whole study. They read the title, they read the objective, and they read the conclusion. And the conclusion says that the vaccine was safe and effective. That's all they bother to read. So the conclusions about safety is that when you start with a flawed premise, you can't have a valid conclusion. And therefore, vaccines really have not been proven to be safe.